I'm going to be talking about today is essentially on 2 levels. So I usually teach this stuff on 3 levels. We talk about the individual, which is a leader. We talk about the organization, and we talk about sort of the macro level, which is the environment around your organization. We're going to focus mostly on the individual, a leader, and the organization. And the purpose of this is to try to figure out how do you avoid yourself and your organization getting into the messes that we've seen from the Guptaleaks, we've seen at KPMG, we've seen at McKinsey, we've seen at SAP, we've seen at Arthur Andersen going back, we've seen at all of these places. What I basically want to do is make sure you don't wind up on the front page of the news, okay? Page 7 is great. Page 7 is, hey, they've launched a new product. That's page 7. Page 1 is, you know, you're there and you have this look on your face. We don't want that look, okay? So what we're going to do to talk about that is talking about values. And there's a couple things just to be clear about values. We're not talking about kittens and puppies and hugging and everything working out great. Values are things that probably most of your organizations have. They're probably on the website. If I asked most of you if you knew what they were, most of you go, I know that one of them is, and that's a problem, okay? So it's about actually using the values that probably most of you have somewhere on your website, somewhere on your newsletter, and use them to actually drive things forward. So the first thing I want to do is also, there's a mindset shift here. So this is a very traditional hierarchical chart. You'll notice about this, 1 is it's very rigid and fixed, and 2 is that leadership is defined by positions or by titles. And what I want you to sort of think about, if this is going to work for your organization, is to actually change that mindset a little bit and start thinking about an organization and people as being very dynamic. So things shifting around. So leadership not just coming because you're the vice president or the executive vice president, but leadership coming because, hey, I have some information into this, I have some insight, I have some knowledge, I have some background, I have some experience. And that might be someone who's quite junior. That might be someone without a fancy title, but they're actually really well equipped to do that. So how do you build this within an organization? So it's a very different way of thinking about it, but that's sort of crucial to making this work for your organization. So first things first. This is just the last few months. Things going wrong quite dramatically. Just in the local press, just pull out a couple of headlines. Obviously the most important one is this one on the far right. A very handsome man wrote that one. It's really, really good. It probably does the best job of it. So we're looking at basically a series of scandals. And again, these are the ones that have made the news, okay? These are the ones that have made the news. So up until about 2 months ago, KPMG was great, right? But now it's in the news and they're not great. So these things, by the time they make the headlines, there's a whole system of things that have gone wrong. And that's one of the key things to talk about in terms of these issues is when we talk about leadership, we often think about these sort of all-knowing, what we used to call in the literature, heroic leadership. Someone who knows everything, does everything, control of everything. And that's just not possible or realistic. So when something like this goes wrong, it's a bunch of stuff that goes wrong. So KPMG just lopped off the top, I think, 10 people from KPMG South Africa. That's not going to get to the root of the problem. It's a good thing, probably, but it doesn't address all the things that need to go wrong in an organization to get to that point in the first place. So in terms of values, we talk about in terms of organizations, here's what it gives you. When you actually have values for your organization and you actually stick to them, which means you build your organization around them, not just put them up on the website, not just talk about them when something goes wrong or when something goes great, but when they're actually part of your organization, what you get is coherence. And we'll talk about 3 types of main parts of an organization: structure, culture, and people. You get those 3 things in alignment. You've got people there who care about the values, you've got structures that encourage people to live those values, and you've got a culture where people can hold each other to account around those values. That's why you have values, not to look good on your website, but to hold all these things together. They give you a purpose, so for individuals, they know why they're there, not just what they do, but why am I here doing that? For your organization, it gives you that bonding to sort of cut across silos. So most of you work in organizations where there is a finance, a marketing, divisions, and you don't want to do those jobs, but you need to know how you're working together. So it gives you that bond to work things together. Gives you a common language, sends strong signals, and crucially for these types of issues around Guptaleaks that we've seen with organizations having massive system failures in terms of accountability, it moves to a professional accountability system, which is fancy talk for just holding each other to account. So you're not waiting for your boss to find out what you've done. How many of you guys have kids? You know when your kid's about to do something wrong? When they do this, right? Can mom or dad see me? I know it's wrong, but can mom or dad see me? All right, so I started out life as a primary school teacher. So I saw that look 1,000 times a day. Can Mr. London see me right now? Because I'm about to do this thing. So a professional accountability system is that you look for your colleagues, you look for your peers, not just for your boss. You're looking at your colleagues, and they're looking at you, and you feel comfortable holding each other to account. So you're not just waiting for the boss to come in and catch you. What you're saying is, look, the person who's right next to me, I'm accountable to them. And if they say, hey, I'm not sure what you're doing here, they have a right to do that. They have a responsibility to do that. Okay, that's a professional accountability system. And crucially, there's a self-accountability system. So when you have a set of values and you're actually in an organization that is upholding those, that is built around those, then you feel comfortable monitoring your own performance because you know what's expected. And you know it's what it says in the tin. So the KPMG story, somewhere in that KPMG story, there's always a little bit, there's always one line in the article about there was a junior auditor who flagged it up. Hey, maybe they shouldn't be at this big wedding, maybe they shouldn't be signing off this stuff. And then that's the end of them, right? That's the last you hear about. That's the one line, and then they're gone. So that's a person who had self-accountability, but in the organization there was not enough professional accountability, and there wasn't adherence to those values that says, look, we're about integrity. Finance, especially for KPMG, is about assurance, right? And you can't have assurance if you're going, I think this is the rule, but maybe it's not. How do you live that way, okay? So a key issue, which we're not going to get tons into, but I think is just cuts through all of this, feeds into that assurance issue, which is trust. So this is a recent memo that went out. The public's trust is not guaranteed. We must earn that trust every day because the loss of that trust is catastrophic. I am deeply concerned that the actions of some in government leadership have harmed perceptions about the importance of ethics and what conduct is and is not permissible. Okay, so that just came out very recently. And if you're wondering where it came out from, that was from the US. Okay, so this has been in the news here a lot, and there have been massive issues here in South Africa, but this is not a South African problem. Okay? It is a problem in South Africa, but it is not uniquely a South African problem. So that's something that the Office of Government Ethics just sent out internal memo to their office, and their office is to hold the US government to account. That's their job, and they're concerned about this stuff, okay? So again, I want you to think not just, oh, South Africa is special because it's doing X. This is a global, unfortunately, issue. So trust comes up in two ways, the internal and the external. Internally, if you don't have that commitment, then because you've lost that trust, that's a massive problem. No one's gonna go the extra mile. No one's gonna put their neck out if they don't trust that that's going to be supported. They're just not, especially if they're lower down the food chain in your organization. They're not going to poke their head up at a meeting and say, you know what, I've got questions about this, if they think the axe is going to come down, if they don't have that trust. Externally, again, a key part of financial work is assurance. You cannot be an effective person who works in the finance space if people don't believe what you're telling them. You just can't. There's no way. One of the whole reasons KPMG, McKinsey, these firms exist is because when something goes wrong, they say, hey, we're going to bring in KPMG, we're going to bring in McKinsey to check to make sure we're okay. And everyone goes, okay, well, KPMG has checked it. McKinsey's checked it. It's probably fine. What does KPMG do now? Right? They can still do great work. But if it no longer matters to companies to say, well, KPMG checked our books, and they're going, who's checking their books, right? So there's a problem there, right? So they can still do great work. Once that trust is gone, that's it. And it's really, really hard to get that back, right? Because what do you say? No, now we're doing it, trust me. Right? So one of the things, I don't want to get too political here, but one of the things about Trump, he finishes lots of sentences with, believe me, trust me. Don't trust anyone who has to finish the sentence with, trust me. Believe me. No, really, that's not happening, right? So that's the challenge for all of you as you work in organizations. If you're around that financial component, once that trust goes wrong, it is very, very hard to get it back. And there are, as you can see from the room, plenty of other competitors who have a good reputation. And how do you get caught up back to that? So again, it's once you start making these little mistakes, they catch up to you very, very quickly, and it is very difficult to bring that back. So we're going to talk about this again from a leadership perspective, sort of an individual level, and an organization. And we're going to sort of jump back and forth between them because obviously they fit together very well. So this is part of the statement that Jimmy Matthews released when he left SABC back in 2016. And because it was 2016, of course, he had to tweet it out. So this is a little snapshot. The key bit about this is a corrosive atmosphere that he talks about, which we talk about culture. So just the environment in which people are in. It can be corrosive, can be supportive, or can be corrosive. But he says, for many months, I've compromised the values that I hold dear under the mistaken belief that I could be more effective. Okay? So again, I'm letting these things slip a little bit at a time. I thought I held this important, and things are starting to slip. He says he's done things that he was not proud of. Okay? So a key bit about this as a leader is these things often don't happen in big, giant leaps. They happen a little bit over time. Okay? The movies tell you the music plays, right? And you make a big decision, and it's the right or the wrong. That's not how real life works. It's all these little tiny things that you do or don't do every single day. And that's why it's so challenging to be a leader in this space. Because if you make a little mistake on Wednesday, you may not see the impacts of that until a year, 2 years down the road. Okay? But it's getting the little things right over time. Got to angle it right. So again, we talk about 3 key factors in an organization to keep it from going wrong, or if you want to think about it positively, to keep it working as effectively and impactfully as possible. One of the structures are the formal bits of your organization, the rules, the policies, the regulations, how people get hired, how people get promoted, all of those types of things. When you start your job on the first day and they give you that massive handbook, or they email you that PDF that holds up your whole inbox, and you go, I am totally going to read that someday. Right? That is totally going to happen. All those things, those are the structures. Those are the rules, the regulations. This is what's essentially the formal bit. When you get audited, that's what the auditors want to see. They want to come in and see, do you have the rules and the regulations that you're supposed to have to do this? Okay? Then you have to worry about organizational culture. Organizational culture, very simply, is the way we do things around here. You walk into most places, within a few minutes, you get a sense of the place. You can't put your finger on it. You don't know exactly what it is, but you think, ooh, I wouldn't want to work here. And someone says, why not? I don't know, I just didn't like it. That's the culture of a place, okay? So that's much harder to put your finger. The structure is easy, right? I'm going to go read the handbook. It's boring, but it's easy. The culture is hard because you walk around like, ooh, this place feels really, well, how do you fix that, right? That's a challenging bit. The third bit is people. Who's in your organization? Who do you empower? What do they do? What skills do they bring? What talents do they have? Are they committed? Those types of things. So what people do you bring on? Which is why the HR people are so important. Your HR function is so important. Who are you getting in? Who are you getting out? And who's seen as valuable in the organization? Who's moving up? And who's not being moved up? Okay? I'm going to skip over this briefly, but there's complication, there's complexity. Complication means lots of moving parts. It's difficult. Complexity means unsolvable. Okay? So what we deal with in organizations is both complication, lots of things happening, and also complexity. There's nothing you can do tomorrow that's going to save you from every single issue that could potentially happen. That's not how the real world works. So complication and complexity. The challenge for us is our organizations are constantly changing, and the environment in which we work is constantly changing. What was okay 5 years ago is no longer okay. Either there's a new rule or regulation, or society has moved on, or the culture has moved on, your people have moved on, the expectations moved on. So that's one of the challenges that you're always working in this space. So, values on an individual basis. Values are the things that are most important to you. Okay? As a human being, this is what's most important to me. That's going to influence the way you look at the world. What information do you see? What do you not see? Okay? So there's a thing in psychology called a confirmation bias. People know a confirmation bias. Okay? If you have a certain thought in your head, if you think the world works in this way, you're going to look for things that confirm that. Okay? So if you think certain people are lazy, right? Then if you see a person who looks like that person and they're not doing something, aha, I knew it. And what you're not going to see is all the people who look like that doing all kinds of stuff, because that doesn't quite fit. So you're not purposely trying to, but that's how your mind works. It just filters out the stuff. It doesn't want to get too challenging, right? So it says, those people, got it. And you're going to skip over the 50 things. And we do that about a lot of things. We do that about people, but we also do that about performance of our organization. So what does a good performer look like? right? What does a high performer look like? What does a good organization look like? And then we look for those things, and we don't see lots of other stuff that happens. So your values feed into that. What do you think is most important? If you think cheerfulness is most important, if that's one of your values, then you're going to look for that. If other people don't know about that, that's a problem. That's one of the challenges we need to get to. So this is what's most important in leadership, is not what you're trying to do. It's the perception of what you're doing. Okay? So how many of you try to micromanage your staff? You wake up in the morning and think, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to get in some good micromanaging. I'm really going to bother people. Okay, one person, very brave. How many of you have been micromanaged before? Okay, so we've got to, right. So most people don't wake up and go, I'm going to micromanage. What they say is, I'm going to help today. I'm going to really help my people out, right? They're struggling. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to really support them. That's what you're thinking, but your people are going, you're micromanaging me, and it's driving me nuts. So it's not what you're trying to do. It's the perception of what you're trying to do. So this is why it's really important about values and leadership, is you need to really be able to communicate those to people. So you need to be able to interact. That's your job as leaders, to interact with people, to have those engagements. And you need to be really clear about what your values are, because then people understand where you're coming from. So one of my values, one of my core values, is always going for excellence, which means a constant drive for improvement. That's one of my values, right? That is classic micromanager behavior, okay? Because I'm like, how can we do this better? How can we do this better? And I don't want to be a micromanager. So what I say to my people when I take a new job is, if I'm in a leadership position, is I say, look, one of my values is always driving for excellence. So this is the stuff I'm going to do, because that's what I'm really passionate about. That's what drives me, is this drive for excellence. So when I come and ask you questions, I'm not trying to catch you out. Why are we doing that? Isn't a gotcha question. It's a, I literally don't know why we're doing that. Can you tell me why? And then we can talk about whether we should do it and how it's moving us forward. But they know at least where I'm coming from. Okay? If I don't have that conversation with them, and I come through and I start asking you questions all day, how are you doing that? Why are you doing that? How about this? How about that? I am not being helpful anymore, right? So it's communicating. Look, this is what's most important to me. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. The other bit about this that's really important is, because leadership is about interactions, that means it's not just you to them, it needs to be the other way around as well. So how do you empower people to say, here's what I'm really concerned about, here's what my values are, and here's how I'm looking at that same issue, and that's why we disagreed. Let's talk about that. That's a key bit of this. Again, your junior auditor needs to feel empowered to say to you, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. We said we're about integrity here. That doesn't feel like integrity to me. Can we talk about that? Okay? So if you give these gaps, people will fill in the gaps. The human mind is very good at recognizing patterns and creating the linkages between them. It's very, very good at that. What happens is, if you don't make sense of things for people, and that's a key leadership job, is making sense of things that happen for people. If you don't do that, people will figure it out for themselves. And the way they figure it out is generally much more interesting than the truth, right? If they don't know how people get hired, they will figure out a way that that person got hired. It'll be a really interesting process. Like, if you can already be like, wow, you think I did all of that? That is amazing. I broke all these rules. I had a relationship with this person. And it's like, no, we have a committee. And we sit at the committee. The truth is usually very boring. If people don't know that, they will fill in the gaps. So if they don't know why you're making the decisions, they're going to say, you know what I heard? Did you know? All kinds of great stuff away from the truth. And what happens is, then you get that separation. You get people thinking, well, if they're not following the rules, even if they are, but I don't think they are, then why should I follow the rules? Okay? And again, these ethical failings we've seen, these massive corporate governance failures we've seen, isn't because one person made a mistake, it's because a bunch of people made mistakes. Okay? So it's not just about you, it's about how do you create an organization where there's checkpoints along the way, where people are going, look, I'm not so sure about that. So, these are the belief systems, values of the belief systems. I'm worried about time, so I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. Values about the belief systems, and again, these can't be things that you slap on your website. They need to be on your website, but if that's the only place they really exist, some people put them up on the walls, and that's where they exist. If they're not built into what you do as an organization, don't bother putting them up. Now, I haven't checked since last year, but up until last year, one of Lon Min's core values was do no harm. I've got nothing against lawmen personally. Well, I got a few things against lawmen personally, but look, if you're going to slap it up on your website, you got to prove that to me, okay? So again, it's not enough to have it. You need to have it on the website, but that's not enough. So it needs to be something that the vast majority of the people in your organization go, yes, I'm in. Integrity, whatever it is. Search for excellence, whatever it is. Communication, as much as practicable, that's one of mine, I'm in. Okay? It can't just be something that's sitting up there. They can be unspoken or explicit, so some people spend a lot of time. So my rule is if I take over a leadership position, I am very explicit about what my values are. So every time I get asked a question, I say, well, because one of my core values is communication as much as practicable, I think we really need to communicate with the following people. I make it very, very explicit. Because people need to know what that is. Then later on, you don't maybe need to do it as much, but you want to make sure it's always going on. They can be positive or negative. Your organization will develop a culture. Your team within the organization will develop a culture. There is nothing you can do to stop that. What you want to do is try to make sure it's a culture that you want. But it's going to happen anyway. So you want to invest in that. You want to think, what kind of culture do we want? And you want to talk about that. This is the type of culture we're trying to create. And so this is why we have these structures. And this is why we've hired these people and not these other people. Because we're trying to create a culture around whatever it is. Okay, but you need to be clear about that. You can't just hope, boy, I hope all these people get together and do what I want them to do and get excited about it. That's a bad way of doing it, okay? And one of the biggest challenges we run into in this space is in HR, we wind up hiring for skill and only skill. So are they a CA? Great. Do they have X number of years of experience? Great. But what you're also trying to figure out is you need those certain skills, but do they really fit in with where you are? Right? That's what you're trying to figure out. Well, after you've gotten past the skill bit, they need to have some skill, but do they fit with your organization? Are they going to help you move, create a culture that you like? What kind of person are they? That's what helps you figure out, if I want to shape that culture, that's what's really going to help you do that. A key challenge in all this is that a lot of organizations, sort of by nature of an organization, they tend to create stasis. They tend to become these very rigid things that sit there and they maintain the status quo. So that when you say, why do we do that? And the response is, that's the way we've always done it, right? That's all about, look, we've kind of been here for 10 years, and this is how it works. Don't be rocking the boat, okay? Meanwhile, the world, of course, has changed dramatically. And you're sitting there going, well, this is how we do it. And the world is thinking, oh, I remember when we used to do it like that. Yeah, I was in a museum once. Yeah, I remember that from like that. Yeah. Okay, and that's one of the biggest challenges. And so one of the challenges we have as leaders is we come in and we have a staff meeting, and we get everyone here, and we put on a microphone and say, look, our organization is now going to be doing the following things. And everyone, because they don't want to get fired, looks at you like this, that face, the smile, the sort of half smile, they might point, They go, I'm not doing that. I got to learn a new thing, a new system, and they're never going to check. And so it doesn't happen. And we go back to our office thinking, well, I really did something today, right? I told them how to do it, and we went back and we think, and then a week, a month, a year goes on, and we're in the same place we were before. We haven't actually moved that. We've given the order, but we haven't actually moved people down there because they don't believe in it. They don't have faith in it, okay? So the biggest thing about this when we talk about values is about foundational practices. You need to back up the words with action. So again, if you say your value is whatever it is, I need to see in your organization and in your people that you actually do that stuff. If you don't talk to me about your values. It's annoying. Don't do it. So if you say, one of the best things that I see, I look at job descriptions because I have MBA students a lot and they're all looking for jobs. If you want to hire them, GSB MBA students are great. They're all looking for jobs. And they send me these job descriptions. And the job description is sort of, we want someone innovative and creative and dynamic, right? And you think, yeah, this is my student. They are innovative and creative. Must have 15 years of experience. Okay, I'm not saying people who have 15 years of experience aren't creative and innovative and dynamic. I'm just saying people who have 14 years of experience are also can be creative, innovative, and dynamic, I think. Unless something happens in year 14 where like you get to January like, oh, like a big light comes on. I don't know, maybe that's what happens. But so we need to think about, okay, if this is what we're saying we want, what are we doing to actually accomplish that? Otherwise, get it off your website. I don't care. So I want to see that match. And that's what I want to see when I walk in your organization. You say you're about this. So when one of my old bosses used to get this great line, he was working at a place, they brought him in, I think it was Sarah Lee. And he was at this meeting, and he was a relatively junior guy, and they said, look, at Sarah Lee, we're all about innovation. And yeah, everyone goes, yes, yes, innovation. And he said, and the head of innovation was up there, and he said, and we have a brilliant 29-step process for innovation. Right? And my boss went, pfft. I said, what's so funny? He goes, say what you said again. He goes, we have a brilliant 29-step. He said, then you don't have a process for innovation. Right? You can't have innovation in 29 steps. You can have innovation in 2 steps, and then 27 steps of figuring out how you're going to make that happen. But you don't have innovation in 29 steps. So again, what you're saying needs to be translated into practice. And if it doesn't, it's just words, and people see through that really easily, and they'll laugh at you, and they're not going to take you seriously. And why would they? Why would they? So foundational practices are about walking the talk. We say these are our values, and you can see them in everything that we do here. Okay? So on an organizational level, maybe it's who meets and when they meet, who gets invited to certain committees and who doesn't. If you say we're about developing talent, you better have some sort of mentorship or coaching system in that place. If you don't, stop saying development of people is one of your key priorities. That's a lie. Don't tell me a lie. Okay? If you say, you know what, we're a family. That's a big one that's come up a lot. We're a family. And then you look at leave arrangements, and you have maternity leave and no paternity leave. Okay? Look, I can't speak for every family, but a lot of families have a dad in there somewhere, right? So maybe it's not family. So those things, if you say it, you need to do it. Okay? Otherwise, it's a lie. It's a lie. And people see that and they go, okay, so really we're about profit. Right? Got it. You have to say that. I hear you. We have to say that kind of stuff, but really we're about profit. Okay? And if you want to be just about profit, knock yourself out. KPMG. Knock yourself out. See what happens. But it also, again, on a personal level, we need to do it on a personal level. Again, we spend all of our time interacting with people. Is your door open or closed? How do you talk to people when you're in the hallway? Do you smile? And are you welcoming? Even if you're not having a conversation, what do you like when you walk down the hallway? That stuff sounds stupid, and who cares? That stuff matters, right? You can't say, we're an inclusive group, and you walk by certain people without even a glance. And other people, you say, hey, how's it going? How are you? Right? People see, they go, got it. Got it. I'm here. These people are there. Got it. You didn't need to say anything. I got it. So I use an example from university. I'm an academic. Academics tend to have very high opinions of themselves because obviously we're great. But there are academics in the school I used to work in, not this one, where the IT guys would come in to put together your PowerPoint presentations because we can't do it. Right? This is key. We're idiots when it comes to that, most of us. So when they would come in, this guy would go, the person would come in and the academic would do this. Like they couldn't figure out where the computer was. Like, yeah, we got it, right? And would basically look away. And then when the person was finished, they go, okay, I'm done. And they go, okay. Right? So that IT guy, who has now saved my life because I don't know how to do it, now goes, right, here's me in the organization. I got it. Right? And the academics go, I never said to him, I don't care about, but you did. And we do those types of things all the time. So again, it's those little things. What does your office look like? Is the door open or closed? How do you engage with people? Do you walk down the hallway? Do you pick up the piece of trash when you see it on the floor? Or do you not? Or do you go, hey, right? All those things don't sound like big deals, but those accumulate. That's how people figure out this is what they really mean when they say whatever. Okay? That's how people do it. So again, that all needs to speak to the values. If you say you're about something, you need to be about that thing. And people will see very clearly where you diverge. And that's what's challenging 100% of the time. 100% of the time. That's why we'll talk about picking your personal values. That's why I have to be very careful about this. Because it needs to be something where you're willing to say, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, this is how I'm going to live my life. And I'm willing to put it out there and be held accountable. Because if you want this to work, and this has happened to me, one of my big things is showing respect for people. So that's one of my core values. I want to be treated with respect. I want to show respect. And I had a colleague come to me and say, you know what, you made this joke in the meeting, and it kind of felt like it cut me off at the knees. And I'm a very sarcastic person. I'm working on it, people. Not there yet. And I said, you know what? I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was trying to do this. I was trying to be funny, and I was wrong. And I appreciate you telling me that. I'm going to do my best to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I did that in public because I made the joke in public. So there's 50, I'm supposed to be in charge. I had a team of 16 people. And there was many more at this meeting. So I said, look, you know what, last week I was trying to be funny, I tried to make a joke, and I really wasn't very respectful of my colleague. And they brought that to me, and I feel really terrible about it because I say my value is this, and I fell down there, and I'm sorry. And I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again, but I appreciate them bringing that to me. Didn't apologize in private, because again, this is about the organization, not me. This is about the organization. That's the type of thinking you need to be doing. Am I living this day to day? Do people feel like they can bring that to me? Does the junior auditor feel like they can bring it to senior management and feel like it's going to be respected? If you don't have a shared set of values and a shared set of practices, then they can't, because they're going to worry about what happens to them. Right? That person felt like they could come to me and say, hey, I know you're my boss, but you said X and you just did Y. And said, you know what? I screwed up. That happens. But you have to be willing to do that. And it's one of the reasons why leaders don't do this, because, oh boy, what if my staff start giving me grief about all the stuff I'm not doing? That's what you want them to do. Keep you on the straight and narrow. That's what an organization does. This is what we're about. You need to be clear with that. So when the match is poor, which means either you don't have an agreed set of values, or you've got a set of values and you've got practices that don't match that up, you get all this type of stuff that we grumble about, those internal politics, which I'm sure doesn't happen with any of you guys, never. Never internal, no, it wouldn't happen to you guys. Other companies have these internal politics. People not sharing information or sharing it but a little bit too late, just happens to be a little bit too late, right? Not having those connections, you're asking the wrong people the wrong questions. So you're asking someone who's senior something, and they sort of like, I don't really know, but someone junior who is really expert in that area doesn't get asked the question because they're not senior enough, even though they're the smart person. So you get the bad answer because you've asked the wrong person, okay? So it's thinking through all these things that we have challenges in organizations. Again, if you have a shared set of values, you have an agreed set of values, you start going, okay, if we're all about excellence, so if I'm running my organization, we're all about excellence, I don't care what your title is. What's the solution to this problem? Throw a hand up. I don't care whether it's the hand of a vice president or the janitor. I need the best answer to the solution. And it might be a combination of all of them, but you need people to feel empowered to do that. Okay? So, I'm looking, how much time do I have? So, I got plenty of time. I can even do questions. It never happens. I'm never early. Okay, so one of the challenges we have as well is it's great to talk about those things. This is what I'm going to do in my organization, but we have these pressures upon us as individuals, but also as organizations. So there's the contextual factors we need to think about, right? You don't just sort of say, this is what we do, and pretend that the world around you doesn't exist. So you've got pressures. In the financial industry, for example, massive amounts of regulation. So you can't just do whatever you want. You have to do it within certain regulatory requirements. But you also have certain requirements in terms of law. You have certain requirements in terms of society and culture. What is it that our society accepts? What does it not accept? Those things change over time. So you need to be really clear about what are the external factors on your organization. So one of the things that's changed in the last roughly 7 to 10 years is that your company can no longer operate in secret. Okay? Via social media, if you screw something up, the chances of it staying secret are pretty small. It may not blow up into, Guptaleaks level scandal, but that's going to get out. Someone's going to go home from work and post on their Facebook page. Someone's going to bring home a document and upload it and send out a tweet. It's just going to happen, right? So there's no longer a case where you can sort of say, look, what happens within these four walls, even right now, right? It used to be you could give a talk and you could say whatever. I would swear, and you could say, you know who's terrible? This person. He can't do that anymore because I got 2 cameras there, and I've got about 8 or 9 different phones I've seen up, right? So if I think, look, let's keep this a secret, you guys, that's not going to happen, right? So that's one of the factors we're facing now in terms of external, is we always need to be conscious that everything you do, even if you're not a publicly held company, everything you do is done in public. And that's a massive change that we need to rethink about. How do we do things? How do we design things? How do we run things? Because everything you do is going to be out in the public, okay? How do you prioritize the needs of individuals and groups? Again, we all have these different stakeholders. If you're publicly traded, obviously you have shareholders, but all of us have stakeholders. And they sit at primary conditions, secondary conditions, tertiary conditions, which just means some of them are directly, your employees are primary stakeholders, for example. But you've got suppliers or retailers, secondary. You've got tertiary, their families, the community. You've got these different influences, and they all have pressures upon you as an organization and you as a leader. What do we do here? How do we do it? And in every choice you make, there's going to be someone who's a winner and someone who's going to be a loser. Okay? If you want to drive down the cost of something, the consumer wins, right? I pay less for my iPhone. That's great. Somewhere down the road, they made those savings. In China, there's a small child putting microchips in, right? There's a trade-off in there somewhere, okay? And we do those choices all the time without thinking about it necessarily. So the example I usually use is, how many of you are for animal cruelty? You love you some animal cruelty. You wish more animals were treated terribly. Really? Shocking. Okay, so that's no one. How many of you eat meat? Leather seats in your car? Leather shoes, belts, right? So for all of us, we figure out, okay, where's the line for me in this space, right? I'm honest. Honesty is big for me. I really want to be honest. Your partner comes home with a new haircut, not an issue for me, obviously, but some families, some relationships. They say, what do you think of my new haircut? Oh, boy. I am an honest person, but I cannot tell them what I really think because I love them. And this relationship is going to be over, okay? So we go, okay, on this side. So we do those things all the time. We make those little adjustments. And what I'm saying to you is those things matter. You want to be really clear about where am I making some sort of adjustment here. Go back to Jimmy Matthews. I realized a year down the road I was making decisions that I could no longer support. I realized it's not one big decision. It's I started down that slippery slope, and then one day you look and think, how did we get here? How did I get here? The people getting fired at KPMG SA are going, how did we get here? And they got there not because of one big thing, but because of stuff that had been happening a little bit. And if you don't have that clear set of values that you can catch early, wait a minute, we said we're about integrity here. Before you make the first choice, let's stop the first choice. Or if you've made 2 choices, 3 choices, that's when you want to catch these things. By the time you've already started down that slope quite a bit, it is very hard to realize how far you've gone. Until, again, front page of the news, then it's a little bit too late. Okay? So again, these values are important. They talk about how you're going to engage with the world. And again, you need to be clear about what those values are and back them up. So again, you want to be able to say to the world, these are our values. You can see how we're living those values all the time. This is what we do. We're happy to be held accountable to that. One of my favorite instances of this is when you have spokespeople, when they're sportsmen or sportswomen. Right, so we have in the US, there was a swimmer named Ryan Lochte. I don't know if people followed this. Very good swimmer. A jerk, but a very good swimmer. Now, see, now it's going to go out. Now I'm going to get a hate mail from Ryan Lochte fans. So he made up this story at the last Olympics where he got robbed at gunpoint in Brazil. Right? Did people hear about that? I don't know how about it. Right? It's like, and then I was mugged and there was guns. And it was like, no, the truth came out and it was like, well, we were drunk and we kicked in a bathroom door and we destroyed the place. And then they got mad for some reason. And that was the true story. So one of his sponsors was Speedo. Right? Makes swimming suits. And Speedo released this press release and said, we have cut Ryan Lochte. He has not lived up to the values of Speedo as an organization. We cannot have him representing us. Now, he'd been doing little stuff like this for years, but now he's on the front page. So now it broke their values. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I wonder what their values are. And I got on their website. And you know what's interesting? I couldn't find the list of values for Speedo. So it wasn't on their website. So I don't know what values it was that he broke, but I don't think they did either. So again, it needs to be clear. It's up on the website, it's being announced to the public, and then you're backing it up, okay? That's really key. You need to be consistent about these things. So going to touch briefly on complexity. I'm not going to go into it too much, but tensions, gaps, redundancies. Those are the fatal flaws in an organization. When you have tensions, things working sort of counterproductively against each other, when you have gaps where you think someone's doing something and actually no one's in charge of taking care of whatever that thing is, or redundancies where you've got multiple people doing the same thing. One, it's wasteful. Two, it probably leads to competition that you don't want in your organization. Okay? Especially in finance. If you're doing the books, you want the books to be the same for everyone no matter who does it. If they don't, then you get into this competition. Okay? So, what you get when you get tensions, gaps, redundancies within your organization, you get counterproductive behavior. Okay. One of the key bits in relation to the Guptaleaks is you get people doing what's best for them, not necessarily what's best for the organization. This is a key issue with senior leadership because in a lot of cases, especially for publicly traded companies, they're getting paid bonuses based on performance or they're getting paid in shares. So they have a vested interest in bumping share price and in getting these big contracts, okay? And that doesn't necessarily pan out for everyone underneath them. So it's thinking through, okay, why are we here? Do I have a group focus? And the group focus is called an integrated focus. So if you have an integrated organization, it means that there's some shared information, there's people exchanging information, there's a connection there. Or you have a segmented organization, which are the silos that people talk a lot. And in some cases, the silos are actually individual people. One of those big silos, one of those big segmented pieces in a lot of organizations, and again, this feeds heavily into Guptaleaks types issues, is one of the segments is the top senior management, the top 8 to 10 people in that organization. In a lot of cases, they live a different world than the rest of the organization. And so they stop seeing those things. Information isn't shared in the way it needs to get shared. And it's not taken on board, and it's not treated as well as it needs to be shared. Okay? So again, complexity comes involved. The more people, organizations, processes you're working with, the more difficult it is to keep all of that in check. So again, the idea behind organizational values is you can have lots of stuff happening, but it happens within these parameters. These are the values. And anyone in that organization can say at any one time, we said our value was integrity. I don't feel what you're doing is actually representative of that. Let's have a conversation. You can disagree. Well, I think it is. Why? Because I think we're doing this, and I think that shows integrity. Well, but you're having a constructive conversation. This isn't about ending all the fights in your organization. Everyone agrees and comes in, oh, we're all great, everything's happening. It's about having fights about stuff that's really important. Not about what people are doing all the time, but why are they doing it? That's a constructive debate. If you all agree you're trying to get to Cape Town, you can fight about what the best way is to get to Cape Town. That's a constructive fight. You're going to look at price, you're going to look at time, you're going to look at, but you're going to all have a common goal. If you say, we're going to go somewhere for a vacation, then you've got fights about where, when, all these types of issues. That's not constructive. The values make everything around that constructive. We know why we're here. There's a shared purpose around that. We need to figure out how to do that, okay? So I'm not going to get into complexity theory because it seemed to have gone well so far, and I don't want there to be any violence. So one of the challenges I always say to people is, look, this is mindset changing. This is thinking about your organization differently, about how we actually use these values. So what I have a lot of times people go, well, I can't change my whole organization. Very few people can. So what I say to them is, look, go change your space. Go change you, and go change your space. If you work with a team of 6, go change that team of 6. Go work in that space. So there's something in complexity theory, and again, I won't get too deeply into this, so you might be freaking out. It's a little bit sciencey, and you might be somewhere on this spectrum here. I don't know of how unhappy that's going to make you, but there's a thing called fractals. Fractals are big bits, and as you break them into smaller bits, the little bits look like the big bits. Okay? So broccoli is a good example. Right? You look at a big head of broccoli, and you break off one little florets, and it looks just like a big head of broccoli, okay? That's fractals, essentially, okay? In an organization, you have a big organization. Organizations don't do things, people do things, okay? So in that big organization, it's broken down into little, you've got your finance group, and even within your finance group, you might have people doing accounting, people are doing financial planning, people are doing whatever. So you've got those little groups. Each of those little groups is a fractal. It should represent the bigger group. What you're trying to do then is go, how do I make myself better? How do I make my team better? I can't do the big, huge organization right now. Got 100 people, 200 people, 1,000 people. I can't do that. You're right. Go work on you. Go work on your team. If you get that working really well, what you'll find is people from the next fractal over going, hey, how are you doing that? How do I get on board? This seems to be working for you guys. What are you doing? And that's a conversation. That's how you tend to get the change. Okay, not changing the organization all at once, but doing those things. The other thing, which is very esoteric, which we will not get into in morphogenetic fields. Anyone know morphogenetic fields? No, because you're human beings and not a nerdy researcher. So morphogenetic fields is this concept that there is energy that's shared between all of us. So if you solve a problem in Australia, it gets solved faster in the United States. Right. So we won't get into that, but this idea of energy shared. So again, it goes back to if you're doing stuff and it's working within your organization, people in the organization are going to say, hey, what's going on over there? Tell me about what's happening there. What are you doing differently? Well, I went to this great seminar, this brilliant lecturer was up there. You can use other words, but this is basically it. And he was talking about values, and so what we're really trying to do is we talk about our values as this, and this is what I've started to do. So we're trying to pull those things together. One of the key bits about complexity is small changes at the beginning can have massive impacts over time. And that's what you want to think about. It's not about a big explosion. It's about doing the little things right, doing the little things a little bit better. And over time, those have massive implications. Okay, there's very few things you can walk back and say, we're going to do everything differently. But you can start doing little stuff differently. And those things can have profound impacts over time. And that's what you're trying to do. Not win for tomorrow, but win for this year, for the next year, and the years after that. It's about sustainability, not that big explosion of this week, but over the course of the next couple of years. You're going to turn a steady profit. You're going to be well regarded in your industry. You're going to have these good results. And this is a very quick audit. Personal values. Ask yourself a couple of key questions. What's most important to you? There's tons of ways to do this. If you're interested in doing this, and I strongly suggest you do, Google, how do I find my personal values? And you'll get a whole bunch of results. Any of them are fine. Doesn't matter. What I say to people, one of the easiest ways is what makes you the happiest, what makes you the angriest. At the root of those things is probably a value somewhere. So when I was quitting jobs all the time, I've had a lot of jobs. I was thinking, there's all different jobs in different countries, like Egypt, America, the UK, here. Why am I leaving? And it was things around, look, I just didn't feel like people were treating me with respect. And that was the thing, so that was mine. So again, there's process for doing that. Ideally, you want your professional and your personal values to be the same. If you have to leave your values at the door to do your job, that's tough. That's tough. It's tough to lead two separate lives. Ideally, you get down to core values. Core values are the 3 to 5 of that long list of values. These are things that are important to me. Here's the 3 to 5 that I think are most important. Okay, that's your core values. And think about, again, foundational practices. How am I living my values? How am I not living my values? Okay, and that's about fixing the you. What can I do better as a leader, as a person tomorrow that I wasn't doing before? Okay. As an organization, there's a very quick organizational audit. These are questions that we go through. Again, what are the core values? What do we do? What are we trying to incentivize? What are we trying to disincentivize? Who do we have here? What makes us strong? These are questions that you should go ask yourself about your organization, and then crucially, go ask other people what they think about it. If everyone's saying the same stuff, you're probably in a good place. If you're getting lots of different answers in lots of different ways, then you might think, okay, we need to think about how do we get this shared. Okay? So again, this doesn't solve all of your problems, but it gets you talking about what's actually most important to your organization. And it starts to figure out what do we say we're about and what are we actually about. And what you want to do is bring those things together. Okay? The number one thing for all this, and by the way, I have an email at timothy.london if you put in my name and GSB, my email address will pop up, or I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to send all these slides to anyone who wants them if they want them. So I'm happy to do that. Just drop me an email or a LinkedIn invite. I'm happy to do that. It's no problem. The last thing I always say is, look, I used to be a primary school teacher, right? So I used to teach like 8-year-olds. No kid ever says, you know what I really want to do? I want to defraud the South African public. Maybe I had better kids in other classes, I don't know, but I never had a kid say, you know what, I want to screw over, and they never said that I want to be a business person, I want to be an astronaut. So what are we doing? Again, society as a whole, but also in business. What are we doing in business that's encouraging people to do things that I guarantee you when they were little kids was not something they want to do? So what are the environments we're creating as leaders that encourages people to do the things that makes the front page of the news for all the wrong reasons. Okay? So again, that goes back to what kind of structures do we have in place? What are the types of cultures we're generating in our organizations? And who are the people that we're praising and rising up to top levels and inviting into our organizations? And if we start getting those things built around things that we think are most important, a lot of this stuff goes away and these kids actually get to wind up doing the stuff that they want to do. And part of that is making money. Don't worry, part of that is making money. Okay? But it's making money for 30 years instead of making money for 5. Okay? I've gone over time, I've been told, so I'm very sorry about that, but thank you very much for, as I said, if you want any of this stuff, drop me either an email to my GSB account or LinkedIn. It's Dr. Tim London. Send me an invite, and I'm happy to share any of this stuff that you guys would like. Just let me know. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.